Welcome to the Raw Food Health Empowerment Podcast. I'm your host, Samantha Salmon, certified holistic health coach and author of You Can Afford to Be Healthy. And this podcast looks at a holistic approach to health from a multi-generational and multinational perspective of women of color. November is National Diabetes Month. According to the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, 34.2 million people in the United States, which is 10.5% of the country's population, has diabetes. Of them, 21% have not yet received a diagnosis. The CDC also estimates that 34.5% of people over 18 years of age, or 88 million people, have pre-diabetes. A study published this summer found that over the last decade, people with diabetes in the United States have become significantly less successful at controlling their blood sugar. In the United States, 90 to 95% of people with diabetes have type 2 diabetes, which is a reversible and preventable illness. If you or someone you know has type 2 diabetes, click on the link in the show notes to learn how you can use food as medicine to get your blood sugar under control and reverse type 2 diabetes. High blood sugar can cause cardiovascular disease and kidney disease, as well as problems with the nerves, eyes, and other organs. Diabetes can also lead to peripheral artery disease and other severe complications. I know this firsthand watching my grandmother graduate from testing her blood sugar daily as a type 2 diabetic and taking diabetes pills like metformin and Plavix and those things to having to take long injections of insulin into her stomach daily. We did all the things the doctor said to do, but she was not on the reversal diet that we now know is possible. This food as medicine strategy could have saved her life. There's no time like the present, so click the link in the show notes to get started. Welcome to the Raw Food Health Empowerment Podcast. Today, we're talking to Hannah Pillow. Hannah Pillow has spent a large part of her life living amongst a wide range of cultures. She was married into a Pakistani family, grew up in a South African Indian family, lived in Istanbul, Turkey for 2 years, and now she's married into a British family and living in the UK. Having not just traveled, but immersing herself in other cultures, she has learned that we are all a lot more similar than we realize. This is why she started a podcast. She wants us all to open our eyes to how similar we all are while appreciating the things that make us unique. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Samantha. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, government agencies have declared racism a public health crisis. Trump's presidency and all that has happened in the last couple of years has caused a shift where local governments are acknowledging the role racism plays in creating structural disadvantages impacting the health of people of color. And 2020 brought up a lot in multicultural and multiracial families. I know Black people who have felt hurt by perspectives shared by their white in-laws during Trump's presidency and the Black Lives Matter movement. What has been your experience in the UK during this time, and how has that impacted your health?
Yeah, it's, you know what, just as you're speaking about this, Samantha, I'm feeling an anxiety in my tummy, just reliving it, just going back to the trauma, I would say the worldwide trauma that we all went through. And at the same time, it was a trauma and an awakening for the world. It was that, I hate to say it was that push the world needed, but we needed to start screaming about this really and making a noise about this so that we could see the bigger change coming about. But I think you highlight a very interesting point here about families, white families making inappropriate comments around their people of color, relatives or in-laws. And I think this problem is something that if your anxiety is starting in your home or with the people that you love, that is going to cause even more trauma, because where do you feel safe? Who do you need to feel safe around? Yeah. I think a lot of us are lucky that we don't live with our in-laws, but still you have to see them, you have to visit them, you have to be around them. and to always have that anxiety facing, what if they say something? How do I react? In fact, Samantha, I was speaking to someone the other day who was telling me about, she actually has British in-laws, and she was telling me about the things that her British in-laws have said to her, and that they now label her as their, what was the word she used, as someone who like kills the fun because she stops racism. Sit with that.
Yeah.
So they would laugh and joke about racist comments, and she would want them to be like, she would speak up, and they would be like, oh, the killjoy is here.
Yeah, that's infuriating.
Exactly. And it comes about the question of what do we do and what do we say, and how do we get to the bottom of this? How do we communicate, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I know for you, you were in the UK, and basically they were going through the same thing with Boris Johnson.
Yeah,
It's
the
like
twin.
your Trump equivalent. How was it like for you personally? Like what impact did it have on your life, and what is it inspired in you to do?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that event itself did not have an impact on my personal life, like with the people around me. It
Mm-hmm.
was more for a more broader awakening to the bigger problem that was
Mm.
going on, and it really got me doing my own personal research. There's a very interesting book that I would recommend to people, and it's called Biased. I'm not sure if you heard of it.
No.
It's written by a PhD Black woman who, I think she teaches bias to the police force in the States. And she comes with a lot of interesting stories about how deeply engraved this racism runs, and
Mm-hmm.
how, like a lot of us say, like, no one wants to say they are racist, and no one wants to admit they are racist, and no one wants to be, become more aware of their biases. It's all such taboo words, and such negative connotations to us, that no one wants to acknowledge that, hey, I'm doing this. This is what's happening, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a difficult thing to do, right? And this book really dives into the core of the issue, and how, like you were saying, how systematic it is, how ingrained it is, and how deep the problem runs, and that it's going to take so much of unconditioning for us to start fixing this problem. There was a recent study done as well about, I'm sure you've realized that on TV now, on in the media, they're starting to represent people of color in a more natural way,
Mm-hmm.
like, as opposed to the Indian guy being the taxi driver or doctor. They're starting to become more normal representative. But there was a study that was done that says that people are actually not reacting more negatively to this representation than we would have thought. And yeah, I know it's shocking, but it's
Wow.
like, people don't like change, to be honest. And it's kind of like with the football world, they started to introduce very slowly female commentators, and people were like, whoa, so people don't like
Mm-hmm.
the change. So all of this undoing and unconditioning and unlearning is going to take years for us to reach a point where we're like, oh, this is normal.
Yeah,
um
that's so interesting you mentioned that, because one of my favorite shows on TV right now is Charmed. And I don't know if you remember the first Charmed. It was
oh
about,
yes.
you remember, right? The three witch sisters. So they've redone it with three sisters. They're witches. They're all one is Black mixed. The other two are Black Hispanic mixed. And they talk a lot about racism, microaggressions, and different like new terms, like, the new
Mhm.
conversations that are very progressive, and the commentary on Instagram. Not only that show, but my other favorite show, which I think everybody listening to this podcast should be watching, New Amsterdam, which is a show about a hospital, and they're, them trying to create change through this hospital system, talking about the social determinants of health, all the different factors that come into your health that is not necessarily about any drugs or, medication or whatever, but like poverty, you're homeless, all of these things that could land you into sickness, and what this hospital system is trying to do about that. And they even had one episode I remember where police, something happened. And so they decided to put police officers in the emergency room, and people felt uncomfortable. The staff felt uncomfortable. Some patients felt uncomfortable with the police presence. So they decided to get rid of the police and bring in bouncers, right? And to at least protect, because of whatever it was that happened, I can't remember, but at least they weren't wearing the uniform that was triggering. And the commentary on Instagram to that episode was like, you're against police, like all of these things, and it's just so interesting that I find like these shows, they're pushing really hard, extra hard, to like every episode is some messaging that, people in social justice movements are talking about. And the masses who just really want to sit down and watch a show, they're being like, oh my gosh, like, because they literally say this in the comments. They're like, I just want to relax and watch a show, and you're bringing politics into
Why are you
it.
teaching me stuff?
Yeah, you're bringing politics. So it's really interesting that you say that. And I think it's pretty cool. It shows some intentionality.
Well, I mean, there was the other very recently, the new Little Mermaid movie that was coming up, and I'm like obsessed with Little Mermaid, by the way. And they wanted to cast a black woman to play Ariel.
Chloe. Or Hallie. Yeah.
And everyone went crazy. And I love the original Little Mermaid, but when I saw that they were casting a black woman, I was like, hell yeah, that's amazing. What does it matter if she's white or black? Little Mermaid is she can sing. That's the most important thing.
Right.
Right. I mean, it was just insane how people reacted to that, as if it was so important that Little Mermaid has to be authentically white. Why?
Yeah. Which it's interesting what folks are holding on to.
Exactly.
That is glaring.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. So insane. And you provide resources geared towards people who have family that has gotten or is getting more diverse through marriages, because you've had your personal experience. How do we, all of us as the collective, Black, white, all the things in between, right, recover from the divide that racial tensions of 2020 has caused within families?
That's a really good question. I will have to say that that's going to be such an individual answer to each family. So, for example, the level that I dealt with it with my in-laws was a very, very basic level, because they have been very receptive to my feedback of them. And the thing is, it can go the complete other way. So what I'm developing, like you said, one of the resources I'm developing is a journal for people dealing with, just to put it frankly, their racist in-laws. And in this journal, there'll be a lot of activities that you can go through, because it's such a personalized journey that we need to go through. I feel like there's no one size fits all answer for this kind of trauma, is what it is, right? There's no one size fits all. And we need to really dig into our own experiences. And for me, it all boils down to our communication styles and the communication styles of the person we're trying to get to as well. Because if we don't understand how they communicate and how they receive the messages, then we can get into a lot of misunderstandings further. We won't be able to connect with them. So my journal will work us through those kind of conversations, those heavy conversations that we need to look for, these things we need to look out for. And you know what? It makes me angry that I'm saying that we have to do the work to connect the bridge. But it's sadly the reality of things is it is us that have to do the work, because the other side is just not ready to accept their faults. And we need to do that, bring it to their awareness, make them uncomfortable. That is what I did. You have to be willing to make them uncomfortable in the most what's the word, in the most accommodating way that you can. Because if we approach somebody on an uncomfortable topic in a nasty way, they're not going to be receptive to us.
Unlike me, I was just doing a lot of yelling and screaming and crying.
Well, I mean, and that's normal, right? I mean, I've done it, Samantha. I've had my Christmases where I was like drunkenly screaming and like, yeah, like really annoyed.
At least
And
you
we've
had
all done it.
alcohol.
We've all done it. It's human. But
Yeah.
if we really want to bridge the gap, then we have to do the work. And sadly, we have to do the work.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because we are not that far out from the change. Like when we think about it, 1965 Voting Rights Act, which didn't happen until Martin Luther King was murdered, right? Because they were trying to get it passed before, but it was him being murdered that really, inspired people to actually take action on this. They're like, oh my gosh, maybe we should do something. Kind of like the George Floyd situation. They're like, oh, we should do something. Which even that in of itself is like, it's upsetting and disappointing, but it is what it is, and I feel like we waste a lot of I personally have wasted a lot of time fighting against what is, instead of dealing with what's in front of me right now and figuring out the best and easiest path forward. Right.
I mean,
And
it's a
yeah.
difficult thing to, like I'm sure you've heard the phrase to fix your house first before you can reach out to everyone else. And
Yeah.
it's a difficult thing in such a trying time to, like you said, to look at our surroundings first. And because we want to help everyone, we want to make big changes, we want to impact the whole world. But I think you are so right, Samantha. We are moving in the right direction. I saw a post the other day on Facebook that said, one day we will just have leaders, not male and not female leaders. We'll just have leaders. And I think in the same sense, it'll be like one day we will just have people, not like for me, it was like my Muslim daughter-in-law or my brown daughter-in-law is like, just a daughter-in-law is fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think we are coming to that. It's just about dealing with the now. And that I would say the boomer generation is the one we need to be looking at right now.
Yes, yes. And I mean, I know for me, I'm a millennial, but I remember in college being in classes with white male peers who were saying the most craziest stuff. I'm like, are you serious right now? And I had to come to an understanding. These were economics classes. I had to come to an understanding that they are sitting in a place where they see the world a lot differently than myself, who's a Black woman, first generation Jamaican American from Queens, New York. You know what I'm saying? Their perspective is just
So different.
it doesn't encompass all the people and all the different life experiences. Like my lens can't really fully grasp the uber rich because I've never been in those spaces, and their lens can't grasp folks who are working people, immigrants, people of color, and they're like, because it seems like their circle of influence doesn't include that, and at that time it made me very angry, but now I understand there's a dynamic at play. Just like how I'm lacking understanding in certain areas, they're lacking understanding in certain areas. The difference then though becomes, where it gets to be stressful, is that it's literally impacting the health of people of color, and specifically in the area in which I work with type 2 diabetes and obesity, which is major in the Black community. And Black women are, in particular, are the highest drivers of obesity within the Black population. As I look into that, what is the cause, right? So there's nutrition, yes, and there's some racist aspects to that, but there's also the daily racist interactions that these people are dealing with that cause stress in the body, and stress in the body causes high blood sugar, causes fat accumulation in the midsection, which, puts stress on our vital organs that we need to survive, live, and thrive, And so even if as I've been going through this in my mind and trying to figure out what is the solution to eradicate type 2 diabetes in this country? How do I help my community? Even if we were to change our diet, but systemic racism exists, we are still not a healthy population. We are still dying earlier,
Yeah.
just based off of what the data and the research says about chronic stress. So I'm wondering, like, from your experience, what is the first step people need to take in getting more culturally sensitive or aware?
So are you speaking about the people like us who are on the receiving end, or are you talking to people like the white people in your class?
Yes, the people who actually are listening to this and actually care, because I assume if you're listening to my podcast, you do care about this issue. You care about the health and well-being of people, that even though there's stress on the receiving end for people of color, immigrant people, for those who actually care about their well-being, like what do they need to do as the first step to get more culturally sensitive and aware?
Yeah, that is a big question. And for me, it starts with becoming more aware of yourself. So you mentioned earlier, Samantha, about how we all come from our own little bubble,
Yeah.
right? There's this exercise that I've developed, and it is available online as well. And it was marketed towards towards mother-in-laws who are dealing with or who have a person of color as their relative in
Mhm.
their family. However, I think that this exercise is something that everyone can do, and what it is it is a breakdown of our identities, right? So it's a breakdown of all the things in our lives that make up our collective identities. So we might think that, for example, if I look at myself, I might just think that my collective identity is Muslim, but my collective identity is made out of so many things. Okay, it's okay, I was Muslim growing up. I was South African, I have Indian heritage, I'm female. All these things make up my collective identity. And then there's another layer on top of that of how much I relate to each of those labels. So we're
Mhm.
working with the labels attached to us, and then we dig into our um, personal identity, so our individual identity, because we all operate on a collective and individual level, right? So my point to get to here is that if you are someone who wants to become more cultural culturally sensitive, you need to understand how complex each individual is. And if you do that with yourself first, with this little exercise of analyzing your individual identity, your cultural identity, and then there's a fun stereotype activity at the end that shows us how stereotypes can actually be harmful. It brings everything to life. So for me, personally, if you want to become more aware of other people, you need to really become aware of yourself and how complex we are first, or even how basic we are in some cases. I don't know, but we need to know the diagram, because then we'll be able to see that everyone's diagram, everyone's makeup is so much more complicated than we are making it out to be.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. How can folks find you online and connect to your services, your resources, your journals, all this stuff?
Yeah, amazing. So you can find me on Instagram as refreshingly human. Or actually, the best place to find me would be on Facebook as Hannah Pillow, or Hannah Hajra Kamda Pillow. That would be the best place to find me, because I'm updating all my social media at the moment. But my Facebook will always be there, and also LinkedIn as Hannah Pillow. Those were the best places to find me. And you'll find my updated social media accounts on those pages as well as soon as I update them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for being a resource and putting these resources out, because I know definitely last year they were so needed and will be needed until we fix systemic racism in this country and in the UK and everywhere else is showing
Everywhere,
up. Yeah.
everywhere.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, thank you, Samantha, for having me.